Hello and welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Today I'm joined by another guest. We'll be talking about the importance of women in leadership, the evolving role of leadership, and confidence comes up a lot as well, a pivotal element in nearly any type of leading or leadership, whether that be inspiring it in others or having the confidence to lead yourself. It's also quite a tricky problem for new leaders who may be lacking confidence or suffering imposter syndrome, overwhelm, stress, the similar challenges as they navigate that new position. So my guest today is Rochelle Janssens, who works with career women to help them win that leadership role.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Rochelle, thank you very much for taking the time out of your evening because of the time difference to join me today. Much appreciated. If we start off with you tell us a bit more about your career background and how you got to where you are today and what you do today, really.
Yeah, sure. So my career right now is two-pronged. So it kind of meets in the middle and then carries on from there. My background is kind of two-pronged as well, I guess. So I started out in the banking world and sort of got into project management quite quickly. And I really enjoyed that because of the variety. Like I'm definitely not someone that wants to do the same thing day in and day out. So did that for 6 years, and then that was back in New Zealand, and then I moved countries to Australia and sort of had a second career, I guess, after I got to Australia and after my kids were growing. While my kids were growing, though, I did a lot of entrepreneurial stuff. I started about probably 8 businesses in the 12 years that I wasn't in a career, and very varied businesses, from a secondhand bookshop, which I absolutely loved. I used to coach mums that ran their own business from home. I had a business, or was part of a business, with civil engineering. So completely different kettle of fish that was. So like a lot of different businesses in those days. And then I decided it was time to get back into my career, and sort of got back because I'd been out for 12 years, got back in at the start again. So started in customer service, worked my way back into project management, did that for another 5 years or so. And recently, in the last couple of years, have gone into something quite different, which is digital capability. And so helping people in a government agency and public service get to grips with the digital world that we live in now. So helping them become more capable with that kind of mindset, way of working, and being able to do things differently because of the pace of change and the technology and stuff that we deal with now. So while I was moving into that career change, I was sort of moving up the ranks at the same time, going into different leadership roles. Eventually, it took me a while to get back to the same kind of leadership role I'd been in before I stopped working when I had the kids in the first time. And so there was a bit of frustration building up in me about the length of time it was taking for me to get back into leadership roles. And I was working with a whole lot of other women who were also really great leaders. Like they had those really good leadership skills, and they weren't getting leadership roles either. And so I started thinking, what is going on here? Like, these are amazing women. Why can't they get there? At the same time, I had other women coming to me saying, I need you to know, I had to pull over on the way to work this morning and vomit out of the door because I cannot bring myself to interact with my manager one more day. You know, really like heartbreaking stories for me at the time. This is a couple of years back. And I was like, here we have these really poor leaders as managers in our organization. And at the same time, we have these really amazing women who are not leaders managers in our organization. Someone needs to do something here. It was just super frustrating. And I thought, if not anyone, then might as well be me. Because I have an entrepreneurial spirit, it's definitely in my blood. I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to do something about it. And the thing that I knew how to do by that stage was, in fact, get a leadership role. I knew what it took for women in particular to get into that leadership management role. And so, I started Her Leadership Way to help women sort of bridge that gap between, yes, I'm pretty good. I know I can do this stuff. I just don't know how to get there. That's how I got where I am today.
Amazingly varied by the sounds of it. I like how you say you were out for 12 years, but actually during that period you started 8 businesses and you're probably the busiest you've ever been.
Yeah, there is no doubt. Raising 2 kids, I wasn't the greatest probably mother either, because there would be times where I would have coaching clients and the door would be shut because the kids couldn't come in. So my husband was there, but the kids would be crying outside of the door because, of course, once the door's shut, they want you, no matter what. It was hectic. I wouldn't change it for a thing, though. I really like all of the businesses that I've done have led me to where I am today. So I wouldn't change anything.
I can't even imagine doing 8 businesses and raising 2 kids at once. I mean, I struggle just doing one business on my own sometimes, and I don't even have kids. So.
Definitely 8 businesses at once. So it was, they were sometimes 2 at once. But I quickly learned that wasn't a good way of running businesses. So I had to, every time I was doing 2 at once, one of them had to go. So ended up with 1.
Yeah. Well, it's really valuable experience to have, though. So, and interesting to hear you've got project management in your background as well. We share that. In all of those businesses that you've started and been part of, what's been your biggest challenge in setting up a business? Pick whichever one you like, I guess.
Over time, I realized, and I realized this before I started this business, is the biggest challenge has always been me. So it's been mostly mindset stuff, right? So back when I was younger, the confidence was definitely a thing. The imposter syndrome was definitely a thing. Who am I to whatever the business was? I didn't like being particularly visible. I'm an introvert, or I was an introvert. I think I'm probably more an ambivert now, but I didn't particularly like being visible. I didn't like selling. I didn't like, just like putting myself out there. And so I was quietly running businesses, and that doesn't work that well. So I think, the biggest challenge for me has always been me. And really, I knew that going into this business. So I started this business with, okay, I'm going to work harder on me than anything else right now. Yes, I want to learn new things. It was a bit of a new world because I'd been out of the entrepreneurial world for a while before starting this one up. So a few new tools and techniques had crept in. So I wanted to learn how to make digital courses and, put them online, and all the Facebook advertising and what comes with that. So plenty to learn. Yet I knew that the first thing I needed to do was work on me and my mindset and getting me in the place where I wasn't my biggest challenge anymore. So, yeah.
Probably the first person that I've asked that question to has answered in that way. Most people, there's always something else to blame, some external factor or someone they work with sometimes. That's interesting. I think that shows what I think one of the most important things about leadership is that self-awareness. You've got to have that. You've got to be able to recognise what you're good at and what you're not, act accordingly.
And maybe that comes with having started so many businesses and failing at almost all of them. Not that I call them failures, I call them lessons. It is that every single one I did learn something, I'd put that into the next one. Maybe because there was such a gap between the last one and this one, I had more time for those lessons to really sink in and realize, okay, these are the things I need to do differently this time. And most of it was work on yourself first.
You kind of answered my next question as well, which was how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, like you said, it's self-awareness.
Yeah.
And then once you've got that, finding the places that will help you to work on those pieces. So definitely for me at the start, it was the confidence, the confidence to sell, the confidence to say, yes, I am good enough to be doing this, all of that sort of stuff. And so I did a course, I did a coaching course, not to coach, but I was coached to up-level me, I guess. So yeah, that was really how I overcame it, was working through a course on me and continuing the work after the course.
I mean, you mentioned confidence quite a few times there. What role do you see confidence as playing in the skill set of a good leader?
A lot, definitely a lot. Confidence helps. It starts with like the ability to feel like you can speak up. And there's two prongs to that, I guess. One is that the environment is such, so a psychologically safe environment. The other is the confidence. So as long as you're in a psychologically safe environment, it still takes confidence to speak out. If you're not in a psychologically safe environment, it's ridiculous amounts of confidence. I think it helps with influence. Speaking up helps with influence, and having the confidence to stick to your principles, your morals, what you see, rather than backing down because someone is talking over you or disagrees with you. Having the confidence to say, yes, I hear you, and here's how I see things. I also think confidence plays a big part in being able to make decisions. So again, sticking with your principles, looking at the data, understanding your biases, and then using all of that to say, here's the decision. Listening to people as well comes into that, but here's the decision, and then having the confidence as well to rethink decisions, which sometimes if we lack confidence, we'll make a decision and then feel like if we change our mind on that decision, if we listen to more data coming in and we change our mind, that makes us look weak. And if we feel weak, then we'll back off. That, we'll be like, no, I'm not going to listen to the data. I'm not going to listen to other people. I've made my decision. I'm sticking with it. It seems like confidence to do that, but I actually think it's the opposite. I actually think you're lacking in confidence when you can't take in new information and change your mind.
I think you're right. I mean, there's having confidence in your convictions on the one hand, but equally, I'd argue it takes more confidence actually to change your mind on something.
Yes.
You talk about the psychologically safe environment. So I think, there's kind of, you've got to have confidence as an individual to be a leader, but also if you're leading people, there's a responsibility, I think, to create that environment to allow others to be confident as well.
Yes.
What advice would you offer to that leader who wants to create that environment? What can they do to achieve that?
So a lot of leadership, I think, comes down to role modeling. It is about asking for dissenting views. So not just allowing them, but inviting them in, because a lot of us are used to not working in a particularly psychologically safe environment. And often when you get to one, you sort of feel like a deer in headlights. You're a little bit like, oh, wait, I can say stuff now and I'm not going to get blacklisted. How much do I believe this? I'm not sure if this is real or not. If I really speak up, am I going to, is something going to happen behind the scenes and I'm not going to know about it? So to really get started in psychological safe environments, it is about inviting dissenting voices in and then making a point of praising them, thanking them for having a different opinion than you and raising it. Thanking people for coming to you with problems. We used to have that saying, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. I kind of switched that around now. Actually, I want you to come to me with problems. If there's a problem out there, let's bring it up, highlight it. Let's talk about it as a team. If you've got solutions, fantastic, bring them in. Doesn't mean we're necessarily going to go with them because we're going to get as much data as we can around this. But yeah, bring me problems. Tell me you don't agree with me, and then praise them for doing that. I think that's the start of a psychologically safe environment.
One of my pet peeves, that saying, from your solutions, not problems. I can't stand that.
No.
I mean, from a leadership point of view, you want to know about the problems, because if you don't, then nobody's going to fix them.
Yeah. They get hidden under the carpet because they're too scared to talk about them.
Exactly. exactly.
And you don't find out until it's all come crashing down, which is good for anyone. So
sometimes literally crashing down as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're building bridges, make sure you raise problems.
Yeah. And I think there's parallels in kind of a social scale as well these days. I mean, you see don't want to veer into politics too much, but you kind of the rise of populism and the idea of dissenting views, and you kind of hear stories about people who are no longer friends with someone because they held an opposite opinion in a debate. And I think that's quite sad for society, that we're so polarized now that you can't even be friends with someone on the opposite end of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think there's a definite parallel there as well in leadership, because we've all worked, I'm sure, for that kind of manager who, you disagreed with me last time, you're not invited to the meeting this time, sort of person.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, you end up with groupthink, and there's no dissenting view, then the decision quality suffers.
Exactly. And this is something I will get on my soapbox off often. Is in a world where we know better, why aren't we doing better? There's research to back up all of this stuff now. We don't want groupthink. We want dissenting voices. We want diversity. We know this. We know how good it is for our organizations. We know how good it is for the bottom line even.
Yeah.
And we still do things the way we've always done things because it's comfortable. Yeah, I won't rant about it.
There's some pretty high profile examples over the last couple of decades where it's been an actual safety issue, and there's been deaths as a result of this kind of thinking. And you look at lessons like that and research around it, and you think, well, how can people still get it wrong? It doesn't make sense. I agree with you.
A lot of it, I think, is that ability of critical thinking, and we need a lot more of that taught in school than has traditionally been.
Yeah, that's one area where I get on my soapbox as well, I'm afraid. So let's move on. If we accept then, and I agree that confidence is a good thing for leadership, so why do you think then it's backwards to wait until you have confidence before you pursue that leadership role?
Yeah, so this took me a while to understand, and I think I was one of the people that was waiting for confidence. And funnily enough, confidence doesn't just show up. You can't just sit there and wait and think that some confidence fairy is going to bless you with a confidence dust, anytime soon. So we'll sit there and think, okay, I'm going to gain some confidence, and then I'll go for that leadership role. And it's actually doing it backwards. When you think about, for the most part, where does confidence come from? And this is not bravado. Bravado and confidence are similar and yet very different. Confidence, for the main part, comes from competence, right? When we're good at something, we are confident about it. When we are good at leadership, we will be a confident leader. Competence doesn't come from waiting for confidence. Like if you wait for confidence and then become competent, again, you're doing it backwards. It actually, the first step is courage, because it takes courage to do something new. It takes courage to do something that you're not yet confident in. And then when you get started, when you take action with that courage and do it again and again, over time you become competent, and then you become confident. So yes, confidence as a leader is a necessary trait, but you don't start with confidence, you end with confidence. And so you can't have confidence in being a leader until you've had practice at being a leader. And so it's sort of starting with that, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to, gather my courage, and I'm going to start something. And as I start and get better and better at it, I will gain my confidence because I have competence in it. It doesn't mean that we then have to do every little thing and become competent in every little thing. Over time, as we do that, we become confident in our ability to get competence. And so we, now if I start learning a new topic, so for example, I've been learning how to use Power BI lately. For some people, trying a new skill like that is scary, and it takes courage to put your hand up and say, I want to learn something new, or then to start. And often at the start, we look incompetent because we don't know what we're doing. And particularly as leaders, we hate looking incompetent. And so it takes courage to say, okay, I'm going to start this. I'm going to look incompetent. I get that. However, I'm going to grow in competence, and then I will have confidence. We get to know that our courage leads to competence, leads to confidence. And so we have confidence in our ability to try new things. And so then it's like, okay, I'm confident in my ability to try new things. So I can now try all of the new things without being competent straight away. Probably a roundabout way of saying it, but yeah.
I like that you draw the line there between bravado and confidence as well. And competence is very important. Think of all of the bad leaders that you've worked with over the years. They tend to be the ones who have what people expect or view as confidence, whereas actually it's arrogance, it's bravado, it's without the competence angle. And I think they become almost self-perpetuating, don't they? Because people look at them and think, well, that's a confident person, I'm going to give them a leadership role. When actually there's no foundation behind that confidence. It's bravado, as you say.
Yeah, and to me, a lot of that comes from fear. So they hide that fear with bravado, and it gets seen as confidence. And unfortunately, like you say, they get promoted, they get higher and higher, and their fear gets higher and higher as well. And so they get more and more cocky looking because they're really quite far out of their depth. And that often results then in, because they are so scared inside, it will often result in psychologically unsafe environments where they're belittling other people or, throwing people under the bus because I don't want to, I have this fear that I'm going to be found out. So I've got to make sure it's everybody else's fault but mine. Yeah, not great, the bravado track.
What skills do you think then are the most important for a modern leader? We'll assume confidence is one of them. What others? There's
a lot. So I'll try and keep it sort of a narrow list. I think self-awareness and that whole emotional intelligence gambit, I think. So self-awareness and empathy to me are two of the top skills that we need in leadership now. It's very difficult to have empathy for others if you're not aware of your own feelings and thoughts. You need to really learn about how you think, why you think the way you think, how you can control your thinking, how you can change your thinking. And then that leads into that, okay, if I'm able to do that and this person is completely different from me, how can I change my thoughts to try and see things from their perspective? To me, that is essential as a leader for your team, because your team, hopefully, are not all like you. You don't want them to be all like you because, like we said before, you go into that group thing. So, you have diversity in your team. You don't want them to be like you. You want to understand their thinking. And also your customers. If we're, as project managers, if we're putting in solutions that help us, how many people are we not helping because they're not like us? So I definitely think, that whole emotional intelligence that they talk about, which to me, the biggest pieces are that self-awareness and empathy are huge. The next one for me at the moment is collaboration, the skill of working with other people. For too long, we have tended to be competitive rather than collaborative. And that's a lot of wasted time and energy. I hate the thought of reinventing the wheel. I will, in my role in digital capability, I will share anything that I've come up with, any resources that we pull together. We make, courses around different digital things. I share them across the whole of government because I don't want other people to have to start from scratch. I want us all to, like the rising tide lifts all boats. I want that. I want us to collaborate and lift the whole of the state and the country and the world rather than competing and feeling like there's limited something. Like, I guess it's a bit of that scarcity mindset. There's enough for all of us and we can all work together to grow the pie to a bigger pie rather than, get our small piece of the small pie. So collaboration, I think, is another big leadership skill. And probably one that's more recent for me is understanding data. So quite different from collaboration and self-awareness and empathy. But I think I come from a digital capability role right now. So data is huge. There is way more of it now than there has ever been. And we need to at least understand how to read it, how to interpret it, when it might be leading us astray. Because, if you see a lot of statistics that are bandied about by different political parties, the exact same argument can be brought about two separate ways based on the same data. So you've got to learn how to be a critical thinker with data and then make informed decisions with data. So I don't believe you make data-driven decisions, which is quite a common phrase these days. You need to bring the human element into data. You need to understand the history. You need to understand the people and the politics that go along with it. But you want to make informed decisions using data. And then the final one is problem solving, which kind of, I guess, taps into that data as well. And what we were talking about earlier, bring me your problems. Not that you have to be the only one solving the problems, but it does need to be a skill that you have. How do I approach this problem? Who do I need to bring in to help solve this problem? What is the real problem here? I can see a surface level. What's the root cause of this problem? All of that kind of thinking to me as a leader is something that we really need to have as a skill. And I unfortunately don't see it a lot yet.
The interconnectedness between the data and the problem solving is really important. It's understanding the problem, isn't it, is the first step, as you say, and then getting to that root cause of it. I quite like things like the really simple approaches like the 5 whys, where you just ask why over and over until you get to the root cause. It feels quite childish when you're doing it, but actually it's really effective.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? You want to be a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
But why?
Yeah.
But it does. It really helps you uncover something that if you'd started at that surface level, your solution may never get used because it's actually not addressing what the real problem is.
Yeah. And critical thinking with the data. And we were talking earlier a bit about biases and things like that. So as you say, I mean, two opposite ends of a spectrum can look at the same piece of data and draw opposite conclusions. So you've got to understand your bias going into it.
Yeah.
Let's not veer into politics again. With collaboration as well, I think there's another aspect to it that's very important. It's moving away from that traditional understanding of leadership and management where you just sort of hand out tasks and then go back to your office and shut the door and wait for the work to be done. You've got to actually collaborate with the team and help with the work and get involved in it as well. You can't just have that barrier and not be involved. Very important.
There's a balance there, isn't there? I think. I think there's both ends of the spectrum where you've got micromanagers that are doing all of the things and really giving you anything to do. And then you've got the almost what I call ghosters who just delegate everything and then, like you say, walk away and come back expecting it to be done with no further consultation or help or anything in the middle. So, yeah.
And take the credit for it usually as well. No, you're right. It is. Yeah, it's definitely balanced. I think the important element is being able to drive that task forward, but also being involved in it. That's kind of where I see the balance.
Yeah. A lot of it is, I guess it comes back to that problem solving a little bit, right? So getting the blocks out of the way so that they can do the work, checking in, like, how are you going? Do you need assistance? Like, as much as leaders think that they are the be all and end all, it's almost the opposite, that they are the helpers. They are the people that get the blocks out of the way, the people that help push it over the line if that's what's needed. The people that can influence if there's, someone that needs to be influenced to get it through. And then, I will often do work that, might be really menial because my team is working on a particular part and they just can't get to that part. They're in a flow of whatever it is they're doing. They can't get to this part. If that's what it's needed to get it across the line, then I'm going to do it.
Absolutely. And again, that's something that a lot of managers don't do. They either don't want to do it or they don't see it as their responsibility. I mean, at the end of the day, if there's no team, I mean, a group of leaders and managers by themselves without people, nothing's going to get done. But equally, you've got to be that helper, as you say. You've got to, if something needs doing, pick it up and do it. There's something to be said as well for keeping your hand in as well, so you don't lose your expertise because you're never doing the work.
Yes, I agree. It's delegating fully, so giving them the full task and the accountability and the responsibility for the task, and making yourself available as a person that they can delegate to within their accountability and responsibility. And I think for some managers it's tricky to step out of the doing, right? I'm comfortable. This is something that I've done for the last 5 years. I'm really good at this. I'm comfortable at this. So I want to keep doing it. So they need to step out and let their team do that. And then, as you say, keep a toe in. So every now and then, I used to run a lot of workshops for my job. Now, as a leader, I step back and I let my team run the workshops. Every now and then, though, I'll go in and run a segment or a day, or if they're on holiday, I get to run a whole workshop. And that's, that's part of why I have to be there to step in so that they can all take holidays when they want to. So agree that you need to still be across things, but not do all of it.
Based on your career experiences and those of your clients and people you've worked with over the years, what are the biggest management lessons that you've taken away from all of that experience?
I think we've probably touched on a few already. I think one of my earliest lessons was that everyone is different, and that, we're taught this golden rule of treat others as you want to be treated. And that really doesn't work. It really doesn't. It needs to be treat others as they want to be treated. And so now one of the first things I do with new team members, or when we're forming a new team, is have a conversation around, how do you want to be treated? How do you like receiving feedback? How do you like receiving positive feedback? How do you like receiving constructive feedback? If I've got something that's important but not urgent, how would you like me to communicate that with you? What channel? We've got so many different channels now. What channel would you like me to use for that? What motivates you? You know yourself well. Let me know what's a bigger motivator for you. So how can I help you get the best out of yourself? And what are some of the challenges that you want? Where do you want to improve? What challenges can I give you that will help you improve in those areas? So I think one of them for me has been learning that everybody is different, and asking them, how do you want to be treated? I think another one is around what we were just talking about, getting that balance right between doing the things and being the leader. What you don't want to be is the bottleneck. What you don't want to be is, you must feed everything through me. I'm going to put my stamp of approval on anything. I had a manager once who was lovely. I love her to pieces. In her head, she was helping me become better. And so every email that I drafted needed to go through her, and she would correct it for me and reword it, and then I could send it out. So she's trying to make me better. I can empathize. I can see, what her intention was. But the outcome was that it took me forever to get an email out, because she was super busy and couldn't always get to my emails in the time that I wanted to send them out. So I think this learning of, it's great to delegate, and it's actually okay to let people make their own mistakes. It's okay to let people learn. That's how we all learn best, right? Is by making mistakes. Don't be the bottleneck. Delegate, give them, let them know to come to you, and give them the accountability and the responsibility to run with it. The last one for me is probably around the number of people I see, and I used to do this myself, who think that working hard is the same as being effective. And it's just not. I think that the two things that I've found to look at for myself and for my teams and for other managers is, look for busyness over effectiveness. So how much time is being spent in my email inbox, or, for us, we have Microsoft. So chatting on Skype or Slack or whatever it is, the tech that you're using, or trying to solve problems that aren't yours to solve. So that busyness over working on the main thing, working on the thing that's going to have the most impact. And then the other thing is perfection over impact. And I have a number of people in my team that are recovering perfectionists, and they are thrilled, in fact, to be given permission to not be perfect and to be celebrated when they're not perfect, because they're amazed at how much they're getting done now, as opposed to what they used to be able to achieve. So it feels really good to them. It's difficult letting go of perfectionism, but they're actually really excited about it.
That was a lot of things in a short period of time. One that jumps out to me is the effectiveness versus busyness. I think you're absolutely right, and we've all seen that, I'm sure. So many cliches we could trot out here, like perfect being the enemy of the good, and activity doesn't equal output necessarily, you know. And I quite like the one, bit controversial, but I quite like the one where you actually want lazy people, because lazy people will find the quickest, most effective way of doing the same task.
Yeah. Does it matter if the outcome is the same?
Yeah.
What does it matter how long it took you to get there? Yeah, I had a small argument with my boss once. Not an argument, just a philosophical discussion around, if you told me, you know, these are the outcomes you want by the end of the week, and I could get them done by Monday, can I not have 4 days off then?
Yeah.
Like, you know, why do I still have to be at my desk for the following 4 days? Of course I do. It's the way of the world. I'd like to see a world where, and I guess entrepreneurialism is that world. You get, you know, your outcomes are what's important. No one cares how long you spent checking your emails or anything like that. So we need that world to filter into the business world as well, I think.
Yes, I think there needs to be a lot more focus on the outputs rather than the time spent doing the task. It's always something I tried to do when I was managing people. It's, if the job gets done and it's only 2:00 in the afternoon, then fine, you know, have the afternoon off. I'm not fussed.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same when I was in the civil engineering business. You know, you can get 2 men to go and dig a hole and pay them to do that in 2 hours, or you can get a machine to dig it in 10 minutes. Are you paying for the 10 minutes, or are you paying for the hole? Like, you know, the 2 hours that those men got should go to the machine, if not more than, because it's done quickly. So yeah, same thing.
It's equating the money to time as well, I think, that's probably where the real problem is, isn't it? Because the bean counters of the organisation will be looking at it, well, contractually I pay this person for the hours of 9 to 5, therefore they're going to work for those hours. But actually maybe we should be paying for what they're producing, not their time.
Yes.
But that would involve a fundamental change to capitalism, so we're probably not going to solve that one.
No, I can't see that being solved in my lifetime. And it's tricky, right? It's not a simple.
No,
it's not a simple thing. Like, not everybody's producing widgets, and so how do you decide? You know, what are those outcomes? It's tricky, but I think there are ways that we can move closer to that than just paid for sitting at a desk.
It's about valuing people as well, isn't it? Because if you're saying you're only valuable to me because of your time, as opposed to your knowledge, your expertise, your skills, that can be quite harmful to the culture of your organisation as well. So maybe that leads us quite nicely into the next question, which is, what would you say are the top 3 mistakes you've seen leaders and managers make?
There's a few. and like, yeah, I guess we've talked about some of them. I think to add to those, I would say Stephen Covey talks about sharpening the saw. And I think a lot of leaders think they're there, they're done, that they've got to where they are because of what they know, and they forget that time moves on, practices move on, ways of working move on, styles of leadership move on, and they don't learn anymore. They're too busy. That's the standard excuse I hear. And it's never time. It's prioritization. It's always a prioritization issue. They have forgotten the benefits that come with learning. And yeah, I think thinking they've made it, thinking that they're there and there's nothing else to learn, is a really big mistake that I see. Causes a lot of pain. And I think that's where, you know, we were talking earlier about, we know better, why can't we do better? I think half the problem is that too many people don't know better, even though the research is out there and the world knows better, so to speak. the people don't know better because they've stopped learning. They've stopped being interested in how to improve as a leader or even, in their area of expertise. Yeah, I think that's a big mistake. So definitely schedule that time and prioritize it and do your learning as a leader is one of my top recommendations. I also think there's too many leaders that let egos get in the way. And I think that's sort of around what we've been talking about already. But that idea that I see it too often. I need to win. I whatever it is, I need to win because otherwise I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy or something. I think often is at the bottom of that. And so it becomes a competition. The long-term ramifications I'm not thinking about. I've just got to win for now. So yeah, I think those are probably two that I would add on to those ones that we sort of talked around already.
It's the bravado versus confidence again, I think.
Yes.
Those managers out there who just let the ego drive I've made it, so I don't have to listen to anyone now. Same reason why they've stopped learning.
Yeah, that's right. It is. It's all tied in together, I think. Yeah. It's why they don't make good problem solvers at the end of the day, because they're not bringing in dissenting voices because I know best. So why would I listen to anybody else? I'm the everything. So yeah, it is the root of a lot of problems, I think.
Yeah, and damaging to their businesses as well, ultimately, because nobody wants to work for a manager like that. They will leave. Yeah.
And, that's like the sign of the times, right? That it's so well talked about at the moment, but the Great Resignation or whatever you want to call it. A lot of that is driven by people seeing their values more clearly for the first time, I think. We've had a lot of time to reflect in isolation. And so we sort of start going, is this do I have to do this? Do I have to put up with this kind of behavior?
One of the other topics that I know you speak about is the traditional ways that we're taught to seek these leadership positions. And I think maybe this is all tied up in a lot of these problems we just talked about. But what do you mean by these traditional ways we're taught to do it, and why aren't they working anymore, do you think?
The biggest thing that I used to believe that I thought was how we got promoted is you work hard. You put your head down, you bum up, as the saying goes, and you are the first in the morning and the last one out in the evening. And someone will notice that you're working that hard and you'll get promoted. And I think that's still a prevailing thought in a lot of spaces. As long as I work hard and I'm good at my job, that's what it's going to take for me to get promoted. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that most of the time. Sometimes, yes, that works. And there's nothing wrong with working hard, although, we did just talk about busyness versus effectiveness. So a lot of that hard work can be busyness and you're actually not producing that many great outcomes. For women in particular, though, I think they come across this there's a stereotype, right, where women are carers, they're mothers, and whether you've got children or not, as a woman, you're sort of brushed with that stereotype. You're a carer. And so this is sort of an unconscious bias where if we see you there first thing in the morning and last thing at night, who on earth is taking care of your kids, lady? Not saying this is right and often not conscious. It's just this sort of, this is somehow jarring for me that this lady is always at work. We don't have the same jarring feeling with men as we do with women in this space. So again, not saying it's bad and unconscious biases are what they are. We can, be really annoyed that they exist and hope that they stop existing. In the meantime, we need to work with them a little bit. So there are better things that make a difference to getting promoted rather than the busy work. And this is for men as well, right? And I think things are starting to change now. So thankfully, there are more conversations happening around men taking paternity leave and time off to spend with the kids and picking the kids up from school. And the more that's role modeled in our organizations, the more that will become normalized and the biases will drop away. What I found, though, particularly for women and also for men, but particularly for women, so there are slight differences in how women get promoted than men get promoted, so this one is definitely for both, is becoming the leader first. And this goes back to the courage, competence, confidence. you need to become the leader before you get the leadership role, right? So that you've got the competence, so you get the confidence, so you get the leadership role. How do you get competent in being a leader before you have a leadership role? That used to be my question. I have no idea how to do this. And when I went back, if we go back to the beginning of our conversation where I said I worked harder on myself than I did on my business, that is being a leader, is working on who you are on the inside. So the self-awareness, the emotional intelligence, the supporting of others, the lifting up of others, the influencing, all of those skills that make a good leader, they all come from the inside. They all come from who you are. And so one of the first things that I work with clients on is, how do you become a leader first? How do you become a leader from the inside out? The second one is making connections. So particularly for women, this is sort of an unconscious bias. So if your organization has a lot of male leaders, the unconscious bias is like, there's the attractiveness bias. So we like people that are like us. And so when we're talking leadership, if I'm a male leader, I am more likely to hire a male than I am a female. In my head, it's completely logical. It is based on merit. There is nothing else to it. However, there is an unconscious bias at work, and it takes a while to retrain that. So making those connections, because you're not a male, because that attractiveness isn't automatically there, you need to start building up other areas that you have similarities with someone. So that can be as simple as just thinking about who you are and all the facets of you, and then listening for clues when you're talking with other people in interview situations or otherwise, where you can make that connection. So if someone starts talking about, their kids going to a particular school, you can be like, oh yeah, my niece goes there. Straight away, that bias sort of gets like slightly lifted, because you now, you're similar, you have that attractiveness stuff in there. The great thing about making connections, though, is you also need that when you're a leader. I've talked a lot about collaboration. The more connections you have across an organization, the easier it is to solve problems. The more innovative you can be, the higher you'll continue to get promoted. So I think that's a really key one. And then the last pillar for me is the visibility. And again, this ties back into confidence. If you're sitting there working hard and you're really good at your job and no one knows you're existing, it doesn't matter. If no one knows that you want to get promoted, then they're not going to give you the challenges or the opportunities. So it's about speaking up. It's about maybe standing up for something that you believe in that's not even necessarily related to your job. So one of my clients is a really big proponent of First Nations people in Australia, and is very vocal about that on LinkedIn because it's her passion. And through that, she's been headhunted, I don't know how many times. The first time, though, was for a wage 3 times the amount that she was on at that stage. Her practicing that visibility, allowing herself to be visible in a space that she's passionate about, even if it's not directly tied to her work, has led to a massive promotion and massive sort of change in circumstances overnight. So those are the 3 things specifically for women. However, also every one of those will work for men. Some of them are just a little bit easier for men traditionally than women.
Yeah, it feels like a shame women have to work that much harder at something in order to cater for someone else's bias. If it works, that's brilliant, and I'm sure it does. Great. But I think there needs to be that conversation had at the management level about the decision makers and about how are we selecting our next generation of managers and leaders, and what are our biases, and can we recognize the unconscious bias? Can we do something about it? And that's something I think that isn't happening in a lot of industries that should be. I mean, the industries I used to work in, aerospace is notorious for that. And I think the other real shame of it is that, in my experience at least, some of, if not the best managers I've ever experienced were women.
Yeah.
And all of the bad managers I've ever experienced were men. And there's a key lesson there, I suspect, about how people are currently getting those leadership positions, how they're attracting that promotion, and the kind of traits that a lot of industries and a lot of those senior managers look for when they promote people. I think there's a certain sort of self-fulfilling toxicity going on there, if you like. And I think that's another reason why maybe it's easier for men, because generally men are more driven by their egos. They're more driven by those less positive traits of leadership, shall we say. And therefore they stand out more to the people who are looking for that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think it's one of those things that I've had to sort of get my head around a bit, I think. And where I've landed at the moment, and I'm always open to change, so I do have a pretty open mind, so I'm happy for, dissenting views. But where I've landed at the moment is this is the game that we're playing right now. This is where it is. We can lament against it. We can be annoyed at it. We can, shout against the wind. It doesn't really change much in the short term. In the long term, yes, and we need to keep doing all of those things. In the short term, we need to work out what the game is and we need to play it so that we get promoted, so that in the long term, the more women leaders we have, the less leadership is seen as a male thing. When we talk leadership, there are words that we use that are also male words. So when we use, you're, as a leader, you're strong, you're assertive, you're goal driven. Those are all stereotypical male words. Until we get enough women in leadership roles, until we, have that balance, and then we start, and it is starting, but we start using words like collaboration and empathy, and we need both. We need both of those sets of words to describe leaders. And when they become just naturally the words that we use for leadership, it will then be natural for us to see either gender, or anything in a leadership role. So, I think it's kind of like this case of it is what it is right now. We can yell and cry and scream that it's unfair, or we can play within the rules that are there for us right now until we can make a difference, until we can start changing it from the inside out. That's where I'm at now.
No, I think that's probably there's not much choice, is there? I think that's probably the only way to go right now, as you say. Yeah, as for words like strong and assertive and goal-oriented, to me, those just immediately red flags and flashing sirens and things. It's just, those are the words I associate with the really bad leaders who don't listen to people, who belittle others, the bullies, the harassers, all those kinds of traits. So I try to push those words away. I much prefer words like collaborator, and regardless of gender or demographic. I think, leadership needs to be evolving. It needs to be getting more modern and forward looking in the way that it is applied by people. And we need to get rid of all of these traditional ideas of leadership that lead to horrible workplaces.
Yeah. I think it's a balance, right? I don't want to tip too far the other way either. We still need to be, as leaders, we still need to be future focused and driving something in a collaborative way with empathy. So to me, the ultimate leader is going to be a combination of both of the masculine and the feminine energies. I hope that's what I hope anyway.
Yeah, I guess words like confidence and competence framed in the context of collaboration and empathy, as opposed to imposition of power and will and all that sort of old school stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad we got to an agreement. I think we were agreeing anyway, but
I think so.
Second to last question, the gender bias that we've just talked about in leadership positions, is fairly well documented. Some industries better or worse than others. Quite a few sectors, I think, are gradually starting to improve on this. What changes, though, do you think organisations can make to help women get into leadership roles, and what can they do to try to neutralise that bias?
There's a lot. There's an awful lot. And again, it's one of those things where I'm like, we know better. Why aren't we doing better? One of the key ones to me is women are traditionally the carers. I like that it's shifting. I like that, men are more likely to take paternity leave and men are more likely to be stay-at-home dads. I think that's fantastic. I'd like to see more of that. So for the sake of both men and women, I would like to see our organizations, I guess, embrace what started with COVID, with the pandemic, is that more flexibility in hours. So, if I can work from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then I can take the kids to school from 8 till 10 and have coffee with a friend, and then work from 10 till 2 and then work from 6 till 8, whatever. What does it matter? Like, does it really matter? And I am, I guess, talking more, office-based knowledge worker roles. There are customer service roles where, yes, that does matter. And I definitely recognize that. However, you can also do more job share roles, particularly in leadership spaces. I've started to see this happen again. There are senior leaders in my organization that are job sharing, one's 2 days, one's 3 days, and then they swap the following fortnight. So they have 5 days a fortnight because they're both new mums. So they job share at a senior leadership level. Like, why not? Why can't they do that? There's no logical reason why they can't do that. And they're very effective at it. So I guess, shifting what it means to be at work would be a really good start. And I think that's good for both men and women. I don't think that's just good for women. I think that conversation we just had around redefining leadership is a key one. Start at senior leadership levels to talk differently about what a leader is and use all of those words, not just the traditional words. I think another one is breaking down silos. So this isn't just for gender. This is for all of the biases, right? So it's not just gender that struggles to get up. It's people of color. It's people with disabilities. It's all the minorities. If we start to intentionally break down silos, so we start to create opportunities for people to talk, to interact, to work together, different ages, different cultures, different genders, even different political leanings, for goodness sakes. Like, that's the hardest. But, start to get the conversations going across those silos so that everybody becomes normalized. It's then where people that I talk to, at the moment, a lot of unconscious bias is just fear-based stereotypes. And so it's not until you genuinely get to know people that are different than you that you can start breaking down those stereotypes and breaking down that fear. One of the things I'm forever grateful for is growing up in a really multicultural part of New Zealand where my friends were every race under the sun. And that to me is normal. I don't, they're my friends. I know a lot of people didn't have that kind of privilege and so don't know that people are people and instead see them as other. So I think, like I said, there's a lot, but those are probably three that I think aren't even that difficult to start with.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point about growing up. It's a question about when the bias is set in, isn't it? Because I think about my own childhood. This part of England, it's where we went to school, that it was 99.99% white, mostly middle class. But then I was also fortunate because our dad was seconded to Australia for a couple of years when we were kids. So I also got to go to school in a completely different environment, very similar to what you've just described, where it was everyone under the sun. And that was, it was actually quite an eye-opener for a kid. I mean, I was 13, 14 years old. And then coming back again to England after that experience, and suddenly all of those biases, they're actually quite obvious. Even to a child. And it's not having the exposure to that difference, that's, I guess, diversity is the word, isn't it? And it is, you can see how easily those biases get set in. And if they're there from a young age, I mean, how do you fight that? It's very difficult. And I think, as you say, you've got to cross those silos, you've got to be conscious about it and have those conversations and seek out those interactions.
I think my word of 2022 has been intentional. I think everything now needs to be more intentional than it used to be. And I think it will lead to far better results. And, I constantly hear about having water cooler talk, and that's why we need to be in an office. Water cooler talk really never worked. Starting to be more intentional about our conversations and about who we interact with that are different, that are outside of our normal silos, our normal spheres. I do think over time, and it will take time, but it will break down those stereotypes and allow us to see that we have more in common than we do differences. Then we get that, attraction bias. We're the same. So I can hire you or promote you because we are more the same than we are different.
Yeah, it's a very powerful message. Time has flown by. We are now at the last question. This is always one of my favourite parts because I get some really interesting and different answers. So I call it Leadership Heroes. And the question is, if you had to pick a person, alive or dead, from history, from last week, past, present, whatever, who, in your opinion, perfectly embodies leadership, who would that be and why?
Don't know if this is going to be considered a cop-out or not, but my dad. So when I was 15, I worked for my dad. So he was a manager of a cardboard box making factory, had about, I'm going to say 200, 250 people working for him. And I started working there in the cardboard box making factory, making cardboard boxes. I was on the machines. I fed in the flat packed cardboard. I was down the other end, pulling them off after they'd gone through a machine and been glued and putting them into bigger boxes. I had cuts all over my fingers. I started work at 5 a.m. I did smoko with all of the peoples. I was known as the boss's daughter, but thankfully in a nice way, not a negative way, because even at 15, I was a good worker. I had good work ethics. I guess that's from my dad raising me that way. What I saw him do, though, I think has shaped how I see leadership and how I turn up as a leader. And so every morning, so he had a family of 4 girls, right? I have 3 sisters. Every morning he would turn up to work at 7 a.m. to the factory and walk the entire factory floor for about an hour before he went up to the office. So he didn't really start work until 8, but every morning he walked that factory floor and talked to all of them about family, about the machines, about the next run that was going to go through, about the footy. In New Zealand, it was always the All Blacks. That's all that matters there. And so I saw him doing that. I was working there for about 4 years, I think, through school holidays and uni holidays when I eventually went to uni. So I saw him doing that for 4 years. And then it wasn't just that, right? That was forming, though. That really... I now look at leaders and I'm like, why aren't you walking the floor? Why aren't you talking to your people? I don't understand. Like, this is these people were, again, from all different cultures. A lot of sort of Pacific Islander people who traditionally don't get on all that well. Is it sort of, friendly-ish rivalry between different Pacific Islands? But the way he led them, they all worked towards the same goal. They all wanted to show up and do a good job. There wasn't, there was some infighting, but not massive amount of infighting. So, to me, it was invaluable to approach leadership this way. And then he also was really good at seeing the best in people. And I guess I talk about me in it, and it's not until I sort of sat back and thought about it. But one of my strengths is to see more in someone than they see in themselves, and help them to realize or unleash their potential. And I think that's come from my dad as well, because he did that too. He would, people just in from uni on an internship, and he would lift them up, and they would leave him and get like amazing jobs because he'd seen that in them. He knew that they could go further and reach great heights from being fresh out of uni. And so I think those 2 things to me are what I try and be as a leader is never putting myself above. My team, we don't really deal too much in hierarchy. We all do what needs to be done. We all delegate to each other. I'm still doing some of the strategic stuff, and they don't get to be involved in everything, but most things they do because, I'm like, we're all people, we're all working in the same direction, and you guys are just as able to be in this role as I am. You're just not here yet. And helping to challenge them and lift them up as leaders, basically, is where I'm helping them to get to. So, yeah, I don't know if that's a cop-out or not, but that is my leadership hero.
I think that's a really great answer. And actually, weirdly, so I've been doing this for a little while now, and most answers I get, it's some Roman emperor or Winston Churchill or a footballer or something like that. But you're now the second person in a row who's chosen a parent or parents. So that's very interesting. And what a great one. And you know what they say, I mean, great leaders create new leaders. So
I couldn't agree more. And that is, to me, that is one of the key responsibilities as a leader.
100%.
And I see this at work, if you are not promoting people in your team after a period of time, that's on you, not on them. Why have you not grown them so that they are ready for promotion?
It seems like a no-brainer for so many reasons, but I think the reason that you would think would make sense to the sort of people who don't think about these things is it's going to hurt your bottom line eventually if you don't. You're going to end up with a stagnant workforce who aren't looking forward. They don't see their next step, or at least not within your organisation. So if you're not doing that, you're only hurting yourself at the end of the day.
You know, I know of a few people that have applied several times for the next level up and haven't got it, and also haven't got feedback, haven't got help, haven't got support to get it next time. And it makes no sense to me at all. I feel like they don't know how to be good leaders. And so how are they going to teach other people to be good leaders? I think that's probably where we're at.
Well, what they do is they outsource that training to someone like us.
Yeah.
We got the shameless plug in there eventually. I knew I could do it. Awesome. Well, it's been great chatting to you. Thank you again for taking the time. Anything you'd like to say about your services or website, or anything you'd like to point the listeners towards if they want to learn more?
They can jump onto my website. So it's herleadershipway.com. And mostly I have a Facebook community where we all chat and support each other, and a lot of memes involved as well, because leadership is, it's fun. We need to have fun. And so we do have fun inside the group, but there's also a lot of support, and I do a lot of challenging in there as well. And then lots of courses. So anyone that's interested in, becoming, getting promoted as a woman into a leadership role or their next leadership role, definitely come and find me, come and join us in the community, and we got your back.
Awesome. And I will put the links in the episode description as well, so people can just click. And that was an awesome conversation. Really enjoyed that. Thank you again to Rochelle for taking the time out of her evening on a Friday, no less, to join me today. If you do want to learn more about what Rochelle gets up to, and perhaps join her Facebook community, do visit her website. I've put the link in the description to the episode. And if you'd like to talk to me more about leadership, or perhaps appear on the podcast, then do reach out. You can find all the contact details on the website. You can sign up, join the mailing list at www.leadernotaboss.co.uk/sign up. And again, I'll put that link in the description as well. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. And remember, be a leader, not a boss.